All right, I hope everybody enjoyed that keynote presentation from Chi Lin of the Open RAN Alliance Technical Steering Group. For this next panel discussion, the goal is to look at the original purpose of Open RAN, both on the technology side and on the market dynamic side, and then compare that to where we are today and understand why. We've got a great panel to have this discussion. It's a pleasure to introduce NTT DOCOMO Global Head of Open RAN Solutions and also evangelist for the OREX, Sadayuki Abeta, Vice President of Product Management with River, Randy Cox, and from Mavenir, Vice President of Project Management, Rick Mostaert. So gentlemen, thank you for joining the panel. I think, as we kind of look at the original promises of Open RAN, I'd maybe divide it into two parts. One, open interoperable interfaces that allow you to connect together a multi-vendor radio system. And then the second part is more kind of market-based. Open RAN is a way to improve both vendor choice, competition, and economics to kind of give operators a deeper well to draw from. So I think, the first part been delivered with some guardrails. The second part may be more open for discussion. So let's get into it. I think I'd like to hear from each of you. Did the industry deliver on the technology and the market-focused parts of Open RAN? Abeta-san, can we maybe start with you?
Yes, thank you. We NTT DOCOMO already introduced the March vendor RAM from 2020. So we have some experience, longer experience about the March vendor network. And so the motivation to introduce the March vendor network, so with the open interface, as you mentioned. So one is that vendor diversity to avoid that supply chain risk. So from our experience, for example, when the semiconductor shortage, some companies couldn't provide their product. But we use that the March vendor network, so we can continue to deploy our network without any changing our plan. So and also that we add the new vendors after the day one. So day two we do that RFP and selecting the new vendor based on the performance and the cost. So thanks to the open interface, open lab, we can provide best solutions according to our deployment scenario. That is one of the good thing which we experience. And this also avoid that the vendor lock-in that is already I mentioned that we can choose the best solutions. And I think the competition is very important. That one of the challenges that this March vendor, especially in that beginning time frame, the deployment area is small. In that case, we see we don't get much diversity gain. So, but if that deployment scenario, we have already have nationwide 5G network, but we have a gain to have the March vendor network. That's our experience.
Excellent, thank you. And Randy, what's the view from River in terms of the past 5 years of Open RAN? If we think about the ORAN Alliance starting its standardization work in 2018, what's been delivered on the technology side? What's been delivered on this sort of market dynamic side?
Sure. I think when we think of ORAN and the original drivers, at least from my perspective, one was flexibility, and innovation, and then TCO. On flexibility, if you look at that, I think we're experiencing that in carriers who have actually decided to actually deploy ORAN. That can be seen in multiple elements, just the ability to choose best in breed technology and mix and match where you have it. And it also prevents, as Abeta-san said, vendor lock-in and really giving the carrier the power to decide the makeup of their network. And I think we've seen that in multiple elements where we're at least present. In terms of innovation, I definitely believe this is, it's created because you have different vendors contributing and bringing a wealth of technology and creativity together that starts to feed on each other. We're working closely and collaborating with RAN software vendors to create feature capabilities that require the cloud platform to interact with the RAN workload and the infrastructure hardware to actually do some pretty creative things. Also, the ability to bring new workloads to the far edge or at the core, bring that kind of creativity. And then lastly, on TCO, of course, there's the competitive aspect of that that is driven in that. But also new technology as it advances that also brings in the element of reducing total cost of ownership.
All right, excellent. And Rick, what's the perspective from Mavenir? I know you all have been at this for a while now. Any observations on where we are relative to those early promises of Open RAN? I think you're on mute, right?
Yeah, I'll address both your points. The first point, I think you already pointed out that it's been achieved in terms of the vendor interoperability. I think it's been achieved times 10. We can talk about it a little bit later. I think you have another question coming up, but the ecosystem is huge. And in many deployments around the world, we see not just open front haul being implemented, but also open clouds, multiple cloud stacks, multiple layer one providers, multiple servers, et cetera, et cetera. It's up and down the entire technology stack where we see where we've done integrations with other vendors. And that's just great for everybody. It allows new people to come into the industry, which is desperately needed. It gives the vendor choice that Abeta-san and Randy already talked about. The lack of vendor lock-in, which is real. We've seen vendors swapped, and it's not hard. It's much easier than it used to be. In terms of the second part of your question, the market dynamics, it's a little bit more complicated because not everybody's bought in. And yes, I think all the infrastructure vendors support Open RAN. We still have radios that don't support Open RAN that are installed. They could with a software upgrade. That makes it hard. There's still an element of vendor lock-in in those situations. So I think the industry is moving maybe a little bit slower than we would have liked it to really get there, but it's not a technology issue, it's a will issue. And so I think going forward with a lot of government pressure around the world, operators are just not going to accept the status quo as well, and that market dynamics piece of it will evolve again. And even the TCO and all the other metrics that we want to measure with the amount of industry support from outside of wireless telecom, any gaps there are rapidly disappearing. There's no performance gaps anymore. The TCO with the new server technology is being driven down very quickly. So I see great things ahead, but it's been probably a little bit slower than we would have liked, but it's going in the right direction.
Okay, so to play that back, we kind of agree that we've got performance parity between open systems and integrated systems. The TCO is very much in line with what operators want. So that leaves this issue, Rick, you referred to it as kind of buy-in from operators that they want to go down this path. So maybe let's kind of look at why they wouldn't do that. And I think, we'll hear about what Ericsson and AT&T are doing together throughout the program. We've got some representatives from both of those organizations, but this discourse around single vendor Open RAN, wherein the radio system complies with relevant specifications, but it is largely provided by one vendor, which kind of shines a light on integrating multi-vendor systems. I think Abeta-san, you'll have a good perspective here, given, as you said, NTT built out their own Open RAN network, serving as their own integrator, and now you've got this joint venture with NEC, the OREX, to provide pre-integration services to other operators. So I guess, tell us a little bit about that integration piece. Has it gotten easier as the standards have progressed, as the ecosystem's gotten bigger? And I guess second part of that, can we look at OREX engagements as a kind of indicator of how operators want to consume Open RAN?
First, so single vendor is advanced vendor, which you mentioned that, as mentioned before, so the most of the operators initial stage to introduce Open RAN. So so first step, they introduce that open interface. Then they can add the new vendors after that. So day 2, if that the deployment area just the 100 site by 1,000 site, maybe the single vendor easy, single vendor opener is easy because that it must be simple. And but when we extended the coverage is 5,000 or 10,000, maybe that we can get so diversity gain. So still that the initial phase, so the operator selected the single vendor. But as for the case, we have already deployed more than 30,000 base station, and we have 30 million customers. So in our case, we have already deployed multi-vendor network. So this is the reason why the single vendor is one is that this is still the initial phase. And the integration is so the big operators may have some R&D, so then they can do the integrations by themselves. And in our case, we do that integration by ourselves because we have R&D. But tier 2 or tier 3 operators do not have such a capability. So if they need to have such R&D, maybe it's costed because first they need to hire the guys. But the integration is honestly that the most of it common because we integrated the hardware and the all cloud and the software. So if we can share that integration part among the operators, we can shrink and reduce cost and also the time. To realize that we create that ORX together with a partner, including Wind River is Mavenir. So to work with them, the operators are more easy to introduce that open RAM, open network. So because they don't need to the additional resource for integration. So the reason we have, and we started providing that solution. Of course, still it is that the POC phase, but we bring that the solution to that multiple operators, and we do the field trial together with them. So since that integration and integrated solution we provide, they can use almost similar to that the single vendor solution, but the solutions. And some cases that we provide different RU vendors according to their request. So there if there are experience supported by, for example, us, I think that not so how to deploy the token now.
All right, we've got a lot of questions coming in here, so we'll try to get to some of these. But Randy, I wanted to get some perspective on you. In many ways, Open RAN certainly is a thing unto itself. But if you think a little more holistically, Open RAN is part of kind of a larger network transformation towards cloud native, or at least it can be part of a larger transformation towards cloud native. I know with Wind River Studio, you all are providing software to support distributed infrastructure core all the way to the edge, including for Open RAN. I'm curious, based on what you're doing with your customers, what you're hearing from your customers, do you see this kind of holistic approach to cloud native, including disaggregated RAN, kind of accelerating time to value and setting the stage for more long-term durable success?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sean. I guess I would say it this way. There are stages and a progression in this journey. And I think initially, obviously, carriers have a big decision to make to go down this, what I will say, virtualized network, whether it's a true vRAN or a true ORAN kind of network. And they have that decision to make, but once they make that decision, they have to actually execute and move forward in a way that is fast-paced, but also achieving the goals that they want. And there's a basic network level that you need to be able to achieve, obviously. But then there comes what you're pointing out is this time to value, or bringing in new innovation, or bringing in new capabilities that will help monetize the network. And I definitely see once you get past the initial network setup and the network is running as kind of table stakes, if you will, I do believe that bringing in new technology will be a lot faster paced. We've seen it in multiple instances where we're at a stage where we have, I would say, mature cloud native networks. Now we're bringing in new workloads, new capabilities at the edge or at the core, where operators want to start expanding that capability. And so we have now new requests coming in that particular area. So you do have to get over the initial hurdle, but after that, definitely the time to market in terms of bringing that new capability is definitely accelerated, I believe.
All right, excellent. And Rick, one for you here, and kind of an extension of this question around interoperability and integration complexity. It's this ecosystem that's developed around Open RAN. You know, we've had some of your colleagues participate in previous versions of this forum, and they've always been, you know, very consistent in that Open RAN success will be the result of a strong, robust ecosystem of technology partners. And you all even were awarded a top spot in an Omdia report on partner ecosystem. So I think maybe it'd be worthwhile to hear from you kind of how this ecosystem-led thinking translates into a value proposition that is appealing to an operator and makes them want to, you know, buy into Open RAN.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, for the question. The ecosystem that is being built up around Open RAN is actually one of the most exciting things about it. I mean, I think the O-RAN Alliance now is tracking the amount of companies involved across all aspects of it. Integrators, technology providers. You look at the names of the companies, it's some of the biggest companies in the world. Like there was a question about, you know, what's NVIDIA doing with AI? I mean, we're working with NVIDIA too. Open RAN allows these companies to come in to an ecosystem that previously was closed. They'd have to go do an individual deal with Nokia, an individual deal with Ericsson. And so it's just a force multiplier for everything. Now, is everything perfect where some small company can come in and just join and provide some product? Not yet, but the architecture is there, the platforms are there, the open interfaces are there. They've all been proven, and so now it's business and it's maturity of the ecosystem and the players that have come in. I think it's an absolute advantage for a company like Mavenir. We are not, you know, so operators get vendor choice on radios and RAN providers and cloud stack providers. That's great. We get choice as a RAN provider to pick the best of breed. So we have multiple server providers to us. We have worked with multiple cloud stack providers. We have our own radios, but we've worked with 15, 16 plus radio vendors. And you know, we outsource the integration of those now. So we have ultimate choice. And that allows deployment flexibility as well. So I think there's a lot of discussion, and I think even questions coming in about, you know, Open RAN single vendor Open RAN isn't really this and that. I'm not familiar with that term. To me, it's you know, we have examples in the network. Say Boost Mobile in the U.S., 20,000 plus sites. They have 30 different vendors in the network. They do the integration. They have one team that goes across all the multiple vendors. Everything works the same way, automation, everything. We have cases where a supplier is smaller, but they say, hey, Mavenir, I'm really interested in this radio. Can you, I want that radio on my network. No problem. We'll do the end-to-end integration. We'll provide that as a, quote, single vendor Open RAN. But that did not preclude their choice, right? So you still get price competition on every element of the network. Sometimes they contract to a single company to do the integration, and that's fine. So there's different ways to deploy. The ecosystem is growing. It's very powerful. And the amount of money, capital, and engineering talent that is now in the wireless network infrastructure business through Open RAN is a great thing for everybody. Consumers, operators, vendors. So I just see it getting better and better and maturing over time here.
Randy, you look like you raised your hand there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple things to what Rick is saying, and I saw the questions as well around this idea of single vendor or multi-vendor ORAN. And I would just caution us not to get hung up on these terms, because it's like saying like, oh, well, if there are 10 different network elements, in order to be ORAN, you have to have 10 different vendors in there to make it ORAN. I'm being extreme here, but I think we're getting kind of caught up in these terms. And I think the fact that we have multiple companies at multiple different levels of the network integrating together is an advancement and a success for ORAN. I do think there is one area where I think there's going to be some, if you will, protection and challenges in getting into that environment, which is at the radio and the RAN software. For me, yes, it's an open interface, but breaking that to some of the traditional vendors, I think that probably is the biggest area where it might be challenging. There might be some technology aspects to that as well. But also, if you will, there's potential of secret sauce there that RAN vendors do not want to give up, or potentially a limitation on their on the technology side of that. But I would just caution us not to get hung up on the terms here in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Abeta-san, anything that you would add to that?
We have already introduced that SME in our network. The SME, of course, that if they try to deploy all the equipment which the big vendor support, so the supporting that 700 megahertz to that 28 gigahertz, that is maybe that very tough and they're very hard to provide competitive equipment. But if they have they focus on that specific frequency band, but the specific different scenario, I think that they can provide a competitive one. And if that the market is not only Japan, but also that the other area, I think it's also that they can scale and they can provide that competitive equipment. So that reason we have already introduced that. So there's SME radio unit in a commercial network. So as already mentioned, the best of breed, we can choose the best solutions, including that SME.
Here's a question from the audience I'd like to throw out to the panel. Thank you to whomever submitted this, but this is about the perspective of the network's operations teams for carriers. Does Open RAN simplify things for them? Does it make their job easier? Rick, what do you think?
I think in the case of, Boost Mobile has come out and talked about this publicly. In their case, it absolutely does. They have one team over 2 RAN vendors, for example, and they do everything the same way. Whereas if you had a multi-vendor network from 2 different companies, everything looks different. And so you need 2 teams of people to do it. So from that perspective, it's done right. Then the operations aspect of it could be much more efficient. And that's a huge driver of the TCO. So it's not just about, can I get another 10% discount on a radio? It's how you run and manage your network. And so, having this cloud native, fully automated network, the RAN vendor comes in. I'm using RAN as a specific example here. Fits on the same server that's chosen by the operator, interfaces to the same radio that's chosen by the operator. Operates the same way through their OSS network, and so that the same person can upgrade a Samsung site, can upgrade a Mavenir site, and that is already happening in the network, and it's very important to make this successful from a business and TCO perspective.
Yeah, Randy, what's your view on Open RAN delivering simplification for network operations? Did that play out from your perspective? I mean, I think Rick, what you said is right. If you did it correctly, it'll be easier to operate. But is that aligned with what we're seeing in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a true statement. I don't want to answer this question and kind of ignore the complexities of integration. Of course, that's there. That is going to be the case. Having said that, the flexibility of bringing, as an example, a new workload, we integrate at Wind River, we're able to integrate initial integration of a new workload in 2 to 4 weeks. Now, getting that to a commercial point where it's actually GA'd into a commercial network, of course, there's a bunch of nuances you have to work through, but basic operation, we're there in 2 to 4 weeks. I think the part I wanted to focus on in that question of simplification is the day 2 operations. And from that perspective, automation is key there. And the ability to do automation in day 2 brings that simplification, as Rick said, across multiple players, as long as that has been done correctly. Yes.
Abeta-san, what's the perspective from NTT DOCOMO in terms of when you all commercialized your Open RAN network? What did it look like for your operations teams over time?
Andy mentioned that we need integration. That's true. So when we introduce a new equipment, we first need the interoperability test. That's sometimes people say that it includes the complexity, but that is that when we introduce new equipment, so that is not happen every day. So every day the operation is that the two speakers they mentioned that the fully automated is key. So introducing SMO, and we supported the zero touch operation, also zero touch provisioning. So once when we update the software, that's automatically upgrade with SMO or with manual. We even though that we use a much vendor, that's operation itself that the automatically set up. So and also that we can maintain what we can support observe the network with that zero touch operation. So even though we use a managed vendor, the operation can be simplified.
And Rick, this is based on a question we've got here from the audience, but you referenced governmental pressure kind of driving to some degree investment in Open RAN systems. Can you maybe expand on that and share any thoughts on what the influx of subsidization may or may not do for continued deployment of Open RAN?
Well, I think I don't know how much subsidize will help. It definitely doesn't hurt. There's lab funding and things going on, not just in the US, but in other markets, which is great. It's very difficult to get into this business from a new vendor perspective. So there's a natural barrier of just the amount of capital investment you need to become a radio or RAN vendor is very, very high. You know, Mavenir's been doing this for 5+ years and has invested a lot of money. I'll just leave it at that. And we've had great financial backing, and you know, we don't get government subsidies or handouts, but there's no other way to foster this ecosystem without at least government support in terms of requirements on new networks. So they typically auction off the spectrum, and there's rules. So where we see, I think, it making a lot of difference is in countries where there's a requirement for Open RAN from the government to help foster that competition. You know, there's geopolitical issues I'm not going to get into, but you know, we need at least that support. Subsidize, great, but without that, I think we have global support from governments to help make this happen through spectrum requirements. And we see pretty much every RFP we get now, there's Open RAN requirements in it. Maybe not for the whole network, but for at least a portion of it. And the timelines we're looking at is, you know, from 2025 to 2030. There's goals, there's percentage goals of how much Open RAN. Because without this, the barriers of entry are so high, the vendor lock-in is so strong that without this support, I think it would be a much tougher task to get Open RAN going.
Right. And we've got about 5 minutes left here, so I'd like to get some kind of forward-looking perspective from each of you. You know, I think that the general question is what can we expect from Open RAN over the next 5 years? And I would kind of append to that thoughts around whether true kind of any to any Open RAN system development, is that really the goal, or does that introduce too much optionality and kind of get into an analysis paralysis type situation for a potential buyer? And then the other part would be around the standards piece. I don't want to go down a 6G rabbit hole necessarily here, but the industry discourse is certainly picking up around to what extent Open RAN architectures and standards will inform what 6G becomes. So any thoughts on any of those questions, Randy?
Sorry, couldn't find my mouse there. Wow, that was a mouthful, Sean. I think that as we look forward, I do think that in terms of 6G, I would say many of the topics that we're discussing here in 5G will, in some sense, be table stakes for 6G. As you look at this new tech, and in this time frame of when industry stating 2030 for as a kind of a milestone, if you will, for 6G, but new technologies like cloud native networks, automation, AI, energy efficiency, and security, those are going to be absolutely required in 6G in my mind. And they will be expected, but more advanced, obviously, and they will dominate the network. I think the domination of cloud native and automation and AI are going to be absolutely critical here. Of course, 6G will also bring new spectrum. And as an example, that will drive some of the flexibilities we're talking about in 5G, where we'll now, and we're starting to see that even in 5G, where we're combining multiple Gs, 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G on single servers. And that's going to be required as we go forward here in order to reduce TCO as well and enable more spectrum to be operated in 6G. I think also that on the carrier side, not to mention or not to forget that they're going to be needing to plan and really build their resources to handle a new network like this. And that requires upskilling their teams, broadening their capabilities, and really retooling their workforce for new areas of advanced technology like this.
Yeah. Thank you, Randy. That also addressed a question from the audience around workforce transformation. So very good. And then Abeta-san, what are you seeing over the next 5 years for Open RAN as it continues to develop?
As Rick mentioned first, the performance of that Open RAN is clearly improved, and we are very focused on that in that energy saving. And we see that power consumption is very competitive now based on the latest technologies. And the good things Open RAN is that the Randy mentioned that open innovation. So we can use the best solutions even though the cheap. So our vendor provided a good solution, and we integrated we can significantly improve the performances. And now, so the performance is competitive, and also the cost, thanks to that, the new deployment scenario. In our case, actually, we can share the resource between the line and the core, and even though the data centers, then we can significantly reduce the total cost. So we have now is many different type of the deployment scenario. Cloudification is one of the things because we can, share the resource among that different network. Then with that, so the cost server, we can significantly reduce the total cost. And then talk with that other operators. They first claim that performance, especially that the power consumption and also the capacity. But we see that the current latest performance is very competitive, and there are operators interested in the latest performances. So they are not deployed in commercial yet, but we see that they're planning to introduce that Open RAN the 2025 end of 2025 or beginning of 2026 timeframe. So in 5 years, I think that Open RAN even in 5G or 4G because that there the EOL come 4G will come, and they want to introduce that single equipment support both 4G and 5G. This is one big opportunity to introduce the Open RAN. So we believe that 2020 end of 2025 to 26 is one of the timing to introduce that Open RAN.
Great, thank you. And Rick, last word for you. What are your expectations for Open RAN over the next few years?
Yeah, I think I would divide the journey here into three main parts. One is the first part was proving the technology and the open interfaces. I think we're well past that. Second part is scaling. I think we're seeing larger scale deployments, and you see in Japan, we see in the US and others that are coming up. That'll continue through this year and into next year. A lot of trials will be going commercial and major deployments. And then the third and final phase, which is I think we're going to really see, and I'm really excited for, is in the next 5 years, is the innovation piece. So now that we have the basics of the technology, we have vendors that can scale Open RAN, operators that know how to run it, operate it efficiently, and then we'll see the power of the ecosystem and the innovation. So, and there's a lot of AI ML discussion. There's the RIC architecture and platform. There's what Randy was talking about earlier, vendors getting together and coming up with new ways to do things at the server level or at the radio level. Today we have 33 operators and 300 contributors into the standards, 11 working groups, 19 test centers, et cetera, et cetera. We've come a long way in 5 years. So the basics are there. And now it's time to get busy and start to innovate and see where we can take this. Sean, we can't hear you.
Well, we're going to have to end it there, gentlemen. I really appreciate the conversation. For everyone in the audience, thank you for these great questions. We tried to get to as many as possible. And if you'll stay tuned, up next, we're going to have a discussion with TELUS about how they're leveraging Open RAN to deliver innovation, hopefully. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.